everybody, and welcome to another episode of Drawing with Steffi. One of the requests I've gotten recently is how to draw animal faces or anthro faces, or how I go about constructing them. One of the first things I wanted to bring up was there isn't really just one way. There's so many different types of styles you can go with, so really the first thing you need to do is figure out what kind of style you want. Neither of them, or none of them, I guess I should say, are better than the others. It just comes down to personal preference on what you really like. This is what I consider my typical style. It's a little bit toony, but it's not super toony. This would still show some fur. It still has a mostly animal-shaped face, but it's still, you wouldn't mistake it as a real critter. It doesn't look like a wildlife drawing. But this one is a little bit more realistic. It's a little less toony, but not too much. It mostly has more detail with the fur. This one here is, again, a little bit more realistic because it has less of a human eye. It's definitely got more animal face proportions. That's kind of in the middle again. And then you have super toony. This is a style I don't use very often, just because my personal preference is I like the more kind of in the middle. But there's nothing wrong with this style. It just means you simplify it a lot more. Sort of like the same way you do with people in an anime style. So let's get started. As usual, I start with lots of circles and squares. But how about we do a fox, since foxes are fairly popular. And as usual, I am using a program called Paint Tool Sci. It's very versatile. Alright. And again, I wouldn't recommend drawing quite so hard if you're sketching on a piece of paper. I just draw this dark so you guys can see what I'm doing. So let's start with a front view. And I'm going to do my usual style, which is slightly toony, but still has some realism. If you're not real sure what a fox looks like, because you just don't have a lot of experience drawing it, or you want it to definitely look like a fox and not like a wolf or a coyote, I definitely recommend using reference. You can get lots of great reference looking at DeviantArt's stock photos. Alright, so what I'm going to do is start with the eyes. Once you have your circle to designate where you want the head to be, I like starting with the eyes. And with eyes, I like to make them a little bit bigger. That's one of those things that makes it a little bit easier to identify with, apparently. That's why eyes are so big in anime. Makes it easier to see expressions and whatnot. And I like making the eyes fairly big. And pupils are one of those things that you can use to decide how feral or how realistic you want something to be. I'm going to scoot this over a little bit. There we go. Foxes actually have eyes like cats. They have slit pupils, so I'm going to go ahead and give it slit pupils. Then I'm going to decide where I want the nose. I want this to be fairly right up front, so we're not going to see a lot of the muzzle because it's foreshortened. And this is another part where you can decide on how toony you want something to be. Since I want this to be kind of in the middle, I'm not going to be super simplistic on the nose. So that means I'm going to draw in the details of the nose, like the nostrils and the general shape. And then I like giving it cheekbones. Sometimes you can't really tell that so much when something's nice and fluffy. And then we're going to foreshorten the muzzle. That's something else you want to look at real closely, is how far the muzzle is from the nose. It can be real different depending upon the critter. This is another area, the eyebrows. Does your critter have eyebrows or does it not? While most critters do have kind of eyebrow ridges, they don't really have eyebrows. So that can be another way to determine just how toony or not toony your critter is. Give it a nice smile here. Whee! But I like them to have eyebrows because, again, that makes it a little bit easier to show emotion. Alright, now I'm going to start sketching in the edges where I want the fur to be. And this is also another area where you can decide just how toony your critter is. And this can also help make folks realize whether or not it's a fox or a wolf or some other kind of dog. It's just how much fluff is on the edges here. Foxes kind of have a tendency to have it just go out to the sides real sharply. And they have fairly big ears depending upon the species. There are several kinds of foxes. Phoenix foxes have really, really huge ears, but this is just a normal, like, red fox. I like putting a little bit of fluff in their ears. Alright, something else you can do when you're drawing an anthro head is decide just how big their neck is. If they're more werewolfy or more feral, sometimes they have thicker necks because they have a lot more fluff. And if it's a little bit more toony, they'll have a more human-style neck where it'll be thinner. So we'll go with a little bit thinner. I think I usually end up doing the slightly feral neck, but we'll put him kind of in the middle there. Get some shoulders. Right. Next step is deciding whether or not your critter has hair. That's another big difference I see in a lot of different styles is if it's a werewolf versus a species that just happens to be animal-like or a werewolf or a were-animal. I like my anthros with hair personally, so that's the way I draw them. So I'm going to add some hair here. It's going to be a guy fox, so we're just going to give him a little bit of a tuft here. He doesn't need a lot of styling gel. Alright, so now what I'm going to do, as usual, is fade this out a little bit, come back in with a different color so you guys can see me finalize some of my edges here. I'm going to zoom back in on the eyes so I can make them a little bit more defined. Thicken up some of the lines here and there. This is just a sketch, so I'm not going to worry about line weight today. A little bit of a eyelid there. And some eyebrows. And the eye itself. And a little bit of an eye highlight there. And then the nose. And that's something else you really want to look at when you're drawing critters is how their noses are shaped. I'm kind of just doing this on the fly, so it's probably not exactly correct. But it's close enough. It's canid. And since it's kind of toony, it doesn't really matter if it's not that perfect. So a little highlight for the nose. Foxes also sometimes have this little black marking right here at the muzzle. I've noticed a lot of people don't really draw that in there. But it just depends on the species of fox. I think some foxes may not have it. And then we're going to do some of the fluff. Zoom back out some so I can see what I'm doing better. The chin area is something else to pay attention to. Most animals do not have a really big chin. There are a few out there like lions and tigers do have a very pronounced chin. Some of the sapien monkey species do. But for the most part, most critters have a fairly thin chin, but that's something you want to take into consideration when you're designing a character. Because it can be part of their personality. So I'm going to kind of give it an in the middle there chin so it's not super thin like it might be in real life, but it gives them a little bit of character, a little bit of individuality. Come back in, do the other side. And his other eyebrow. And a little bit of that cheekbone there. I'm not going to be too nitpicky today with my lines. Add in that little muzzle marking there. And his smile. You want to be sure of where you stick your smile lines, because you want to remember that this is a kind of a cylinder-like shape for the muzzle. So there's a lot of foreshortening when you do an anthro face from straight on. And then bring in some of the fluff. Add the chin again. And his neck. There's the shoulder. A little bit of the collarbone. Add in his other ear. When you're designing something, you also want to ponderate things that make it look like an individual. Decoration, special markings. Don't turn it into a sparkle dog, though. Clothing, facial markings of various shape, forms, and fashions. This guy, he'll have a little bit of a white comes around here, just like a normal fox. This is really messy. And then put in his hair. Whee! Don't forget to have fun, as they say. Sometimes the top of their ears are black too, so I'm going to add that in. There we go. It's a little uneven, but it's good for just a doodle. And normally I would continue to refine it. Let's give him a, let's see here, give him a shirt collar here. Whoops. There we go. Some shoulders. So that's one way you could draw an anthro head. I'll draw you another example. Let's save this. Remember, save often. Okay. Clear that out. All right. Let's draw, let's say, a cat, but much more realistic. So how would I go about that? Well, again, same setup as before. I'm going to start with a circle or a rectangle. Let's do a lion. Kind of do it from the side this time, but only a 3/4 view. And since this one I want to be more realistic, I'm not going to start really with a circle because I want it to be much more like an animal head stuck on a human body. So it's not going to have quite as much of a crown for the head. It's going to be a lot more sloped. Here's the nose and the big old muzzle. And that big old chin I was talking about earlier. The eyes are going to be smaller by a lot. They're also going to be different shaped because they're going to be more realistic shaped. Again, if you're not real sure about how that should be, look at reference. Reference is your friend. And a little bit more of a brow ridge there. And they have this little bit of a jowl there. Actually kind of gets a little dark there too. It's going to be poofy. It's going to be a lioness, I think. And cheekbone. And then the jawline here. Give her a little bit of a tuft of fluff. And then the ears. And unlike a kitty cat, they're a little bit more round. They do have some fluff in there. And I'm not going to give her any hair, because she's going to be one of those types that does not have any human hair. But that doesn't mean she can't have some human qualities. There's still lots we can do. Give her a thicker neck. And she's not going to have any eyebrows, but she's going to have some of the brow ridges here. And those typical markings. Give her a scar there because she's been fighting. And there can still be some fluff to the character's appearance. Just not a full-out mane or anything like that. And lions have circular pupils. I'm going to lighten that out some more and then go back in to put in my details. I think I might make the eyes just a tad bit bigger. But I'm not going to do any eyelashes. I mean, technically they do have them, but that gets a little bit toony looking. I'm going to do a fairly heavy line for the eyes because they do have some darkness to the edges of the eye. And I also tend to be a little bit more sketchy instead of having hard lines when I want something more realistic looking. So it doesn't have that cartoon sort of outline. That's something else you want to consider when you're drawing your anthro. It's like, do you want to have hard lines? Do you want to have minimal lines? No lines at all? Just depends on what you want to do and how amount of time you have to do it in. Nice big poofy chin. A little bit of that jowl. I have this little dark area here. I'm going to go and put in some of the whisker dots. Not sure what these things are called. I'm sure they have some official name. I tend to leave these off when I'm doing a more toony looking critter. Unless it's like a tiger or something. But there are lots of decisions you have to make when you're creating something. And then add in a little bit of that brow and a bit of fluff with the cheekbones. And you just want to look at the skull features. Again, reference will help if it's not something you're really familiar with. And the way the fur patterns go. That'll help a lot when you're deciding which way to draw your critter. On my favorites list on DeviantArt, I have assembled a list of other artists and how they draw their anthro critters. I'll include a list in the information section of this video, so you can click on that and take a look for some more really awesome examples of ways and styles to draw critters. I suggest you take a look, because the more styles you check out, it'll help you figure out what ways you want to draw. because there's so many different ways and so many different styles. You can find one that you like or has aspects that you like. Come in here. Again, lots of fur distinction. Want to consider the musculature. And a little bit of chest fluff there. And let's give her some earrings. And how about a necklace? Whee! Couple necklaces. Another earring. There we go. Give her kind of that tribal vibe. Let's give her a nose ring. There we go. And put those scars back in there. Make her a little bit more of an individual. Some of the things you can do to make something look like a character and not just a random doodle. There we go. You zoom back in so you can see it a little bit better. Put a little bit more detail down there. And that's just another way you can draw an anthro. I hope you've enjoyed this little information on how to draw anthro faces. If you have other questions or suggestions for tutorial topics you'd like to see me do, feel free to email me. You can email me at cybercatgraphics@yahoo.com, or you can leave me a note here at YouTube or on DeviantArt. I hope you'll check it out, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.